Universe at War is our all-new RTS. It's a brand new intellectual property. It's completely created from scratch. Sega's let us go completely crazy just creating these new factions and this new story and these new units. It takes place in 2012, very close to present day on planet Earth. And basically there's these invading factions that arrive on Earth and just start kicking butt, which you get to play control over. There's 3 very, very cool, diverse factions that we really like because we feel that they play extremely unique and different to each other, as well as to what people are used to in traditional real-time strategy. We're doing Games for Windows Live. We're interfacing in with all that for our multiplayer and really, really embracing the whole Microsoft Games for Windows standard, which is really, really cool. The biggest challenge has really been in unit creation and logic. We've really tried very hard to make the entire engine data-driven so that modders and our fans can modify the game with Lua and XML. So we've really had to data drive all of our behaviors for our units. And so everything that a unit can do, people can modify.
Unit under attack. Unit under attack. Structure. I serve the hierarchy.
The most exciting thing to me about Universe at War is just how we've actually been able to create factions that really do play differently. And even the mindset of playing the faction is different as you play each one. As you play the game and start to realize that, man, I really am thinking differently when I play these sides. I have different things I have to worry about. I actually am either staying focused on a couple of big things or I'm constantly moving around the board very frantically. And I'm really proud of the fact that we've actually been able to deliver on the promise of making 3 very unique factions that you can play that actually make you think in a different manner. When you're playing the hierarchy, you're just stomping around the map. You've got these giant war machines that are very customizable for production and for combat that you can just use to tear through a map, destroy everything, and push your enemies to a corner and destroy them. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we've got a faction like Novus. Novus is a very high-tech, computerized force that has the ability to electronically move around the map through this series of signal towers. And using this ability to flow, they can actually break themselves down and move around the map very quickly. They're very light compared to the hierarchy, but they can launch all these kind of crazy and incredible hit-and-run attacks on all of their opponents. So you've got one force that's kind of a big, heavy foot that's stomping down on the maps, and then you've got this cockroach-like force, Novus, who's running around and scattering and spreading as fast as they can and are very hard to contain and control. So it's between those two and our third faction, which I can't talk about just yet, you have a very diverse palette of units and abilities that you can use to kind of fight each other. We wanted to make a game that was very, very customizable, and so we approached that from a couple of angles when we were building Universe at War. The first is what we call tactical dynamics. Every faction has a way that they can adjust their strategies on the fly in response to enemy attacks. So, for example, if an enemy was bringing in a lot of air forces, you would be able to switch your tactics if you could see that coming and change up your abilities in order to counter more heavy aircraft assaults. And each faction has a very different way of doing this in the game. The hierarchy, for example, use hardpoints on their walkers. They can completely customize these for different kinds of attacks, different kinds of defenses, and that allows them to kind of come back if a large assault's being moved against them and they don't have the proper things in place to deal with it. Oh, I can switch out my hardpoints, change them up, and hopefully mount a counter to that. Novus has a series of patches, so they actually have the ability to download information and upgrades into their units that allow them to counter different scenarios as well. If you need to get away from somebody very quickly, you could overclock your units and make them move very fast, but if they take damage, they're going to take even more because they can kind of break down because you're running them too hot. They can also, upgrade shielding and things like that in order to counter some of the other attacks that the enemies can throw against them. When you're playing our solo player game and playing this kind of story that we have set up for you, we've taken a lot of time to make sure that the actions that the player does within each battle actually influence the direction the campaign goes. So instead of someone telling you, hey, you have to go do this, go capture this, go do that, as they play the game and make choices in the battle, that actually affects how the campaign goes. It's really nice because the player really feels like they're in control and driving the story rather than being kind of led around by the nose.
Give us your orders and make them hurt.
One of the things we really wanted to emphasize in Universe at War is the multiplayer, and we really wanted to give the game not only long legs, but really fun things that a player could do when they're playing multiplayer. And kind of like an MMO, you can log on for 15 minutes, you can log on for 2 hours, and you can still have fun and have accomplishments happen. One of the ways we've done this is through having this kind of conquer the globe mode, where a player actually sees all the territories in the game, and as they play multiplayer matchups in each territory, they can win those territories. We kind of ease you into it at first. You can't really lose territories, but as you go through and kind of conquer more and more, the stakes keep going up, and suddenly you find that if you lose a match in a territory, you'll actually lose that territory, get knocked back. In that way, the player always has something they can kind of shoot for and progress as they're playing multiplayer. And that's just one of our modes, actually, that the player has available to them while they're playing in multiplayer, so that they can kind of mix it up between traditional gameplay and this more kind of achievement-oriented version of multiplayer games. Thanks for the time. I think you're really going to enjoy Universe at War. You can expect us on the shelves towards the Christmas holiday this year, and looking forward to seeing you online for some multiplayer.